Some stories remind you of just how powerful a woman's intuition truly is, and today's guest is living proof. Jalisa Hardy turns obstacles into purpose, pain into service, and now empowers women to reclaim their inner wisdom. Her journey will inspire you. Let's dive in.
I tested positive for having Down syndrome. And then 6 months into her pregnancy, they did the anatomy scan. They said, "We're sorry to give you more bad news, but your baby's going to be born without a stomach, and her esophagus and her windpipe will be fused together."
Right? They have these numbers, but they're just guessing. And then it changes women's lives forever, one way or the other.
I've
Mhm.
never felt so seen. I've never
Mhm.
felt so understood.
Yeah. Welcome to From Wounds to Wisdom. This is your host, Barbie Moreno, and we have Jalisa here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I really enjoyed our conversation prior to us talking today for this podcast. And one thing that you told me that I found very interesting was when you were in the womb, your mother was told certain things, which you can tell us. But I find that this happens quite often. So I really want to talk about it because I feel like the decisions that your mom had to make and all of that different stuff um, is different than a lot of women feel pressured to do. So, would you give us a background on your beginning?
Yes. So at the time I was conceived, my parents were actually in the process of getting ready to get a divorce. But being grown married adults, they were still doing what grown married adults do.
Mhm.
And out came me from that union. Um, and my mom had already had a history of fertility challenges. So she had two miscarriages before me and then one after me. And with my sister, who she had 3 years before, she was able to carry to full term. So my sister was born at 4 pounds, 4 ounces. So with her history, they already were kind of bracing themselves for challenges with the pregnancy. And 4 months into her pregnancy, they do all the genetic testing, and they discovered that I tested positive for having Down syndrome. And then 6 months into her pregnancy, they did the anatomy scan, and they said, "We're sorry to give you more bad news, but your baby's going to be born without a stomach, and her esophagus and her windpipe will be fused together. And if your baby is to have any chance at life, at having any quality of life, she's going to need multiple surgeries, if you're even able to make it to full term." And with that news, my mom being a woman of faith, she decided, she says, "Yes, I see the test results. I've heard your recommendations." One of the nurses actually recommended the best option for her would be to terminate the pregnancy. And she said, "I hear your recommendations. I hear, everything that you're saying. I see the test results, but I'm believing for a different outcome." And with that, she decided that she would go to a revival and let them know what was going on, have them pray over her. And she said the only thing that she remembers is feeling like she was being lifted off of her feet and that God was pouring gold into her stomach.
Mm.
And when she went back to the doctor, they couldn't find anything wrong with me.
Just from, do you know how long it was from when she went to the revival and went to the doctor?
I'm not sure, and I don't think she even knows either. She might, but you always ask the detailed questions. I'm like,
It's your
what
story.
question?
You need to know your details. The before we continue with your story, because there you've done some amazing things in life. But so when I was pregnant with I believe it was my son. I have two children. They did the same thing. So I was considered a high risk pregnancy because I was 34. That's a big deal. So, they like to do all those stupid tests and stuff like that, which I think are more
Mhm.
intrusive than anything else. And they said because of my genetic history, my husband's genetic history, one of the tests came out like that. I think they said my son was going to have some disease. I don't remember what it was. Some sort of illness and deformation. And then it was interesting because they double checked and then they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, that was a mistake." And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, because they had me as like Hispanic and I'm not. I'm Spanish. My father's from Portugal. His family's from the Portugal. And so the difference between being Hispanic and, or Latino, it was Latino,
Mhm.
and Portuguese changed the results of this test after they had already said XYZ was going to be wrong with my son. And I thought to myself, like, such a crazy thing to tell somebody when you have no idea if that's true or not, just because you ran some numbers. And the same thing, they were like, well, if you continue, I think it was 10 weeks or something, if you continue with this, these are your options prior to even like rechecking this information. And I think that that happens to quite a few women who have found that the information that they were given was not accurate and their babies were born. Now they didn't have the severe things that they were telling you and the things that they see on the ultrasound, and the mother didn't go to like a revival, but they still made decisions based on what the doctor said. And some of those women have chose to terminate and have tremendous guilt because we really don't know if what they're saying is true. They're just guessing, right? They have these numbers, but they're just guessing. And then it changes women's lives forever, one way or the other. And can you imagine then you like almost have a terminated pregnancy and then your baby comes out just fine? Anyways.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate, and that's one of the reasons why I became a doula,
Hmm.
because I had some similar experiences with my pregnancies where they were basically trying to say, "Oh, your baby's going to be too big. You're going to need a C-section." These types of things that women experience every single day, and it's not always the case. My baby, my baby was 6 pounds 12 ounces. I'm like, you were telling me my baby was going to be 10 pounds.
Yeah, I don't understand being that they do this all day long, how many mistakes that they make. Have you ever seen that? There's like a series on Netflix. It's called like Call of the Midwives. Have you ever seen that?
No.
As a doula, you might like it. It talks about how in a specific area in Europe, they still had midwives and similar to like a doula, right? So the women were very connected with their patients, their women that were pregnant, and they had this beautiful connection. Then as time went on, they became more and more, where they were trying to get people to go to the hospital versus having home births. And the difference between the connection with the person who was delivering the baby when it was like with the midwives, which I'm assuming you feel the same way as a doula, when it was with the midwives, they had a bond, they trusted them, everything was very personal. And then as they moved towards hospital births, it was very sterile. People didn't give them their baby right away. They gave them advice like, oh, you have to have a C-section instead of just maybe shifting the baby around or whatever the case may be. I think that we've come so far away from the natural ability of women to give birth. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
It has been very much made into, it's about patriarchy, it's about capitalism, it's about the money.
Yep.
How quickly they can get women in and out is
Hmm.
what has been done in hospital settings. I've actually been reading about the history of that transition from midwives to the practice of OBGYNs, and there are still some very deep rooted beliefs and practices that have come out of the history of it. But it definitely is one of the reasons why I do the work that I do, because we have so much innate wisdom and power as
Yes.
individuals, as women, to know what we need, to know what our bodies need, and especially when we're pregnant, it's just the intuition, all of that is heightened because we're not just taking care of us,
Right.
but we've been conditioned away from knowing what our bodies want, what our babies need, what we're capable of when it comes to delivering babies. It's like,
Hmm.
no, you need all of these interventions, you need all of this, we need to be monitoring. When in some cases, yes, it's helpful, but in most cases, it's really just the doctor's comfort, not for the comfort of the mother and the baby.
I agree with that. And I'd like to just touch on a few of those topics. One, the patriarchy, though that show, it was so interesting. These women do all of this work, and yet the male doctor is still considered the all-knowing. And they celebrate these beautiful births and the midwives and all of these various different things, but they always turn to the male doctor for the external validation of what needs to be done and all of these different things, even though as women we're born very intuitive. And so the mother giving birth is intuitive, but the woman servicing the mother is also intuitive and knows what is needed at the time. And we shut down our intuition because we're told that's not true, you guys are crazy, whatever the case may be. And then as far as the money thing about it, it's like they say there's like a restaurant saying that like you turn the tables, right? You get them in and out as quick as possible. And so what
Hmm.
should be a beautiful moment is exactly that. It's a way for them to make money. And by the way, those that don't know this, a cesarean makes significantly more money for them, the hospital, the doctors, than a natural birth. And so they actually push people, specifically people of color, towards cesareans versus natural birth.
Yep. And that is the underlying issues in the system, because a lot of women, specifically women of color, get pushed into these C-sections and then they're left without being taken care of. Or if they say,
Mhm.
oh, something's, I feel right, or something's wrong, they're pretty much ignored. And that's when, the maternal death rates are increasing, because things are not being done the way that they should be in hospitals. You literally just cut through 7 layers
Right.
in my stomach in 24 to 48 hours. You're like, oh, you're good to go home, you and baby.
As a dualist perspective, and from what you know in your work and in your life, I want to know what you feel like you've learned is the traditional time it takes a female, a mother, to heal from the birth. Because I've heard various different things, like doctors will say, oh, 6 weeks. And then I've heard it really takes 2 years to heal from the birth. And then, so that's traditional, regular, vaginal birth. And then you have a cesarean birth. So what's the difference between the two healing times? And then what do you feel like from what you've experienced is the true time frame?
So I had the way that I had my kids, I had them literally back to back. Before everything even healed, I went to my 6-week appointment pregnant with my
Hmm.
second. So I didn't even have the time to even give my body a chance to heal. But from my sister, she had two cesarean sections. She's next door. Watching her process of healing, and mine, all three of mine vaginally. It
Hmm.
was a complete difference. One, because that was a major surgery she had. And then she had hers similarly. Hers was about 6 months after her first, when she got pregnant with her second. But all in all, it takes longer, way longer than 6 weeks
Hmm.
for a woman's body to heal. It just depends on, one, what you're doing, the support that you have. Because if you're doing everything on your own, you don't have support. You're not able to sit down and get rest. Being a single mom, it's a completely different experience. Your body doesn't have the time to really rest, recover, and heal. And that's why postpartum doulas are
Hmm.
so important, because you have that additional support, that additional care for you and baby, and for your partner in
Hmm.
that case, because their own experiences with welcoming a child into the family.
Sure.
So having that additional support gives you the opportunity to give your body and yourself time to heal, that you wouldn't get otherwise, having to go back to work at 6 weeks or 8 weeks if you have a C-section, and that is
Mhm.
not enough time. You've literally carried a child for 9 to 10 months or less, sometimes if you give birth sooner. But to say your body has completely shifted and changed, your hormones and everything has shifted, your organs and everything has shifted. You have a hole the size of a plate in your body. Oh,
Yeah.
after 6 weeks, go ahead and go back to work. You're fine.
Right. Right.
Absolutely not.
And that's about money too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so instead of honoring the experience and the beauty and the it hurts children too, right? So it hurts the children's growth. It hurts their connection. They're just shipped off to daycare so that a stranger can raise them. So even beyond the money, which is why they want women to go back so early, so they can continue to work and produce and consume. But beyond all of those different things, the repercussion for the baby to be taken care of by a stranger and not get the connection from the mother is traumatic.
Yep. But because again, those systems that they have in place, okay, the sooner you can get your child into to daycare, okay, sooner they'll be conditioned to the system of going into the school system, so that you can
Hmm.
continue to work and produce money for
Hmm.
the system to
Consuming.
continue to
Yeah,
work.
consuming. Yeah.
It's more about money than the family, than for the parents, what's best for the child. It's about consumerism
Hmm.
and capitalism being continued. This weren't created or designed for women.
In the United States, because there are places where women get a year or 2 years off, or sometimes they get support for the
Paid,
rest of their life, right?
paid.
Yeah, they get paid time off. It's particularly our country in the United States that just wants you to get back to work so that you can continue to make money, put your money into the system, employ other people so they can make money and they can consume and they can spend their money. And so our country, I believe, is one of the worst countries for women in many ways, but particularly when it comes to maternity leave.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I couldn't disagree if I tried, because I've had conversation with people that even had hospital births in different countries, and they're like, it's nothing like
Yeah.
it is in the United States.
They often get like 2 weeks, right? That they stay.
And
Yeah.
they're taken care of. Even the delivery process, the labor and delivery process is completely different.
Yeah.
How warm and how patient they are, how mother driven they are. They're focused on, okay, what does the mom need? What is best for her, not
Right.
what's best for the hospital or the facility.
Yep. I remember when I had my son. So this subject, let's be clear, is near and dear to my heart because there's a ridiculous amount of experiences I can talk about from this system. But when I had my son, they didn't tell me that when a baby is first born, they actually lose a few ounces.
Hmm.
And when I had my son and I went in for my checkup and they weighed him, they were like, "Oh, you're not producing enough milk. He's starving. We need to put him on formula." And I was devastated. One, it made me feel like a failure. Nobody told me that it was normal for him to lose a few ounces. They literally said to me, "You are starving your baby. We need to put him on formula." And guess what? What does formula cost? Money. And you know
Hmm.
what's funny is they happen to have free samples. Oh yeah, I'm sure that wasn't sponsored by somebody, right? Do you see that a lot?
Yep, and I experienced it myself with my third. Um, he's tiny in general. So, when he was born at 13 ounces, but I was going through a lot, and I had already breastfed my first two. So I'm like, I'm not going to have a problem. I produced so much milk with my first, and he was in the NICU for 45 days. They're like, you got too much milk. Like, take it home. Please, you got too much milk. So I'm like, the production is not a problem.
Yeah.
Him eating is not a problem. Him waking up is not a problem. He's just tiny. They literally label him failure to thrive because they felt like he wasn't gaining enough weight and tried to push the formula model to them. I'm like, yeah, no.
Yeah, because you knew, right? The thing is that there's not a lot of education on that. It wasn't even until I watched that Netflix show that I learned it takes a while for the milk to come in. Like it doesn't
Mhm.
come in the day your baby comes out. It doesn't go, whoosh, I have a bunch of milk in my breast, right? There's
Yep.
a process to it, but we're not told that. So when they're telling me I'm starving my baby, I'm thinking, well, I don't seem to have that much milk, so that's probably true. Not understanding that it takes some time to come in. And they
Yeah,
are getting as much as they're supposed to get.
exactly. And they don't need a lot. They were literally in your womb for 9 months not eating, 9 to 10 months not eating. So it's like they're not starving. They're
Yeah.
not starving at all. They're getting what they need. And it does take at least 3 to 5 days if you've had a vaginal birth that wasn't augmented or induced. But if you have a C section, it could take longer.
Yeah, and that's what I had because of course they like forced me into C-sections because I wasn't dilating fast enough on the first one. And then the second one, if you already had a C-section, you have to have a C-section, even though I didn't want to have a second C-section. Yeah, C-section. Yeah. It's
Mhm.
insane. Tell me between this whole mess and a doula.
A doula is there to provide the information, the emotional support, and the physical support for this process in your journey, giving birth, going through pregnancy, delivery, postpartum, to advocate for you
Mm,
in those cases where, for me, learning what I know now as a doula, it's like if I knew this,
yeah.
my experiences would have been completely different. Because a lot of the things that they force or they pressure you into, oh, you're harming your baby, or
Mhm.
you're gonna harm your baby if you don't get a C-section, you could die, your baby could die, like all of these fear tactics that they use. A doula can be there to really support you with navigating those experiences and being intuitively guided, to remind you to come back to yourself, to remind you to do the things that you know to do when it comes to your pregnancy and your experience, so that you're not forced into making decisions uninformed. We provide the information so that hey, they're going to say this, they're going to say XYZ, but these are your options. And you can actually ask certain questions to them so that they can even kind of rethink what they're doing. Because a lot of times it's, oh, this is what they were taught, this is what they've
Right.
been doing for years, and this is kind of like what they're used to, is familiar to them. So anything outside of that is like a threat.
And
So if they come off like very aggressive or snappy because you're kind of going against the norm,
right.
then you're prepared for that, because you have a doula there with you to
Mm.
advocate for you, while you and your partner are there to have a beautiful experience that can sometimes go in a different direction because of the rules, the regulations, the the patriarchy, all of these things that have been in place for years, instead of saying, you know what, this isn't what I want. And this is how things are gonna go, whether you like it or not.
And they, if you question them, they make you feel like stupid, right? Like, well, I know better than you do. I do this all damn day long, and you're just like, oh, like, well, okay, type of thing. Like you said, they use the fear. Is Does the hospital or the insurance pay for the doula, or is this coming out of people's pockets?
In some cases, depending on your insurance, now it's more widely covered or partially covered by insurance.
Hmm.
But a lot of times you do have to pay out of pocket because they don't want doulas in the
Right.
hospital.
And so this goes back to, I've had this conversation over many different things when it comes to our healthcare system and our country in general, but only people who have the means get the help, and it irritates me because unless you make money in this country, you cannot get good health care, you cannot get good education. It's people who have the means.
Yep. And it's unfortunate, but there are organizations and doulas that do provide specifically for underserved or low income communities. So it depends. And there are some organizations and like Medicare now starting to cover it, but with that is not as beneficial for the doula, because it's like, okay, your postpartum appointments are, they're only charging what, $16. It's like,
It's not a livable wage.
it's not like I want to help, but I'm literally,
Mhm.
doing all of this work. I still have a family to provide for.
Right. Right.
So it's like the way the system is set up, it's not going to be beneficial for the doula. So they're not going to really want to push in that direction to support people on Medicaid.
Right.
So it's like a catch 22, like you said, for the people that really want and need the support, they don't have the means to.
Right. And it's usually the people who don't have the means who need the most support. I'd love to learn more about, well, one, mom was very faith driven. She prayed for your healing and received it. I know that you are similar to me in the fact that you're a Reiki master, you do energy work. I'm more spiritual than religious. Is there for you a difference between, like, one, I don't know if your mom was spiritual and not religious, or religious and spiritual, or whatever, but did you shift in any way, shape, and form in the energy world, or was that something that you were already accustomed to? Like, what was that for you?
It was a complete shift.
Yeah.
Very much religion, very much Baptist church, very much strictly this is what it is. If it's not that, it's demonic. So it definitely took a lot of shifting my beliefs
Hmm.
and releasing beliefs, because I did have that very dogmatic way of thinking and seeing things like, oh, that's not
Hmm.
the right way or the right thing to do, because it's not this specific way of
Right.
living.
Right.
And it definitely was like in the very beginning when I first started practicing Reiki, I was actually in the process of becoming a licensed minister.
Yes.
So it was like I was kind of like, I'm learning over here, but I'm also learning over here, but I had to keep this kind of
Yeah.
under wraps.
Yeah, of course you did. Yeah.
Because if the church knew, there would have been a whole other situation. So
Yeah.
for me, I felt like I was living a double life as I was exploring and trying to have an understanding for myself when it came to spirituality, when it came to God, and really build my own relationship with God outside of religion. In the beginning, I was very much keeping it under wraps
Right.
because I didn't want to be ostracized or
Mm.
looked at a certain kind of way by my church I grew up with.
And I found like that's so funny because it's so hypocritical, right? Like supposedly God loves everybody equally, but not if XYZ raised me. But then it's interesting because what you say about like the energy work and stuff, I was the same way, right? Like I didn't want people to know that I worked in energy. Like the people who knew, but then it was like everybody else, I would never bring it up. And I think it's an oppression of women because back in the day, they'd burn us and call us witches simply for being who we were born to be, which is a natural intuitive healer.
And a lot of that mentality is still within the church, within different beliefs,
Mm.
because as people, as women, they don't want us in our full power. Because when we're being intuitively guided, your marketing,
Right.
your advertising, your programming, all of that stuff is not going to work
Right.
because I know that I have an individual path. I know that I have an individual calling. So I'm going to follow that instead of following what you think is best for my life. They don't want free people.
Because you can't sell them stuff. You lose your, your consumerism, right? Which is so sad. Do you feel like there's a shift?
I
Yeah.
actually do. And the more that I design and energy work and astrology, 2027 is going to be a huge year. The shift has already been happening little by little, but 2027 there's going to be a huge shift where people go more inward than outward for
Hmm.
their direction and for their life path. And it's so important because everybody was born for a specific life path, a specific calling, a specific
Hmm.
purpose. And if you don't know that, you're literally throwing off the rest of the world because we're all connected.
Hmm.
So if you're not walking your path and in your calling, you're impacting someone else that was supposed to meet you on your life's journey on that life path. Intuitively guided we can be, the more in tune we can be with who we were truly created to be versus this conditioned and programmed version of ourselves, the easier and more peaceful life becomes for everyone.
Agreed. And in that same breath, because I do believe what you're saying about 2027, also beginning in the end of 2026. But the thing that I think it's important for people to understand is it's going to get rough. When you want to break down this machine of people just making money on you hand over fist, they are not going to make it easy. It is changing everything. So you will be, fear driven. They will take stuff from you. You will be put into a position where you literally have to choose which way do I want to go? Do I want to be aligned and live in my full power, or am I going to let them crush me?
Yeah. And I think it, because we have so much, I guess, focus on the external
Hmm.
and the outcomes, which is really, that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But
We need a part two to this, right? Like we can't get it all in one thing.
but it's like it can be difficult, but the more that we the inner work, the
Hmm.
more that we are intuitively guided and do the healing work
Yes.
to really step into our full power, what they do on the outside, whatever they take, whatever they do, it will not matter because our true being is so much bigger than just our physical body.
I agree with that. And in the same breath, there are a lot of people who are beginning the process that's the people I'm talking about that this will be hard for because they haven't yet come to that place to understand who they are. They're not in alignment with themselves quite
Yeah.
yet. They would like to be, they're on the journey to be. And then all of a sudden, there's going to be this big test, right? On do you want to go that way or not? I could talk to you all day long. So, what I would love is for people to be able to find you, to tell us how we can find you. And I will put all this stuff in the description.
Yes, my website is jalisahardy.com and I am everywhere at Jalisa the Golden Child. I am on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn, all at Jalisa the Golden Child. And then again, my website is jalisahardy.com.
And it's JALISAHARD, like in David, Y.
Yep.
Perfect. And I always ask for one thing of wisdom that people can take and leave with today that is a tool that is actually usable, that is not going to take them, a ridiculous amount of time to implement. What would you give our audience?
No, I think what we talked about as far as getting your human design chart,
Mm-hmm.
starting there, even if you know nothing about it, it will give you like, I literally had somebody pull up their chart and read just a part of their energy type, and they're like, I've
Mm-hmm.
never felt so seen. I've never felt so understood.
Yep.
And again, it just gives you this validation that nothing is wrong with you. Like you were
Yeah.
literally designed and created uniquely for the purpose, the calling, and the position that you feel here on this earth. And there's nothing wrong with you.
And it'll
So,
help you live your divine aligned life, right?
absolutely.
So for people to know, I paid like $197 for my report. So the fact that you have reports on there for free is like a big deal. Appreciate you. Absolutely would love to talk to you beyond this. And I think that you will help a lot of people. So thank you for everything you do.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Bye.
If this story spoke to you, let's keep the healing going. Visit barbiemoreno.com for my online course, Awakening Your Worth in Healing Energy sessions, one-on-one coaching, and your free healing guide. Your next step is waiting.